What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the shelf, and today I am excited to talk about some underrated, or perhaps more aptly, underseen horror anthologies. I really love the structuring of a horror anthology. It's almost like a collection of short stories, like in a book that you might find, except in cinematic form. And I just like the idea of there being several stories within a story, and you can have your favorites and your least favorites. It just gives you a little bit more variety as well. There's a lot of different themes and different kinds of horror movies that you can do within a horror movie. You could have a ghost story, you could have a slasher, you could have a creature feature, all housed within this one film, and I just think that's a really cool thing. It also has very natural chapters and breaks in the story where you can maybe finish it the next day if you're not really feeling like you want to watch the whole thing, or if you just have a segment that you really like, you can just put on that particular segment. I don't know if people do that, but the point is that it's an option, and it's something that is available to you through the nature of anthology horror films. And so when we talk about something being underrated, what does that really mean? I tend to think that a lot of things that people say are underrated are actually more just like underseen. I think there's a difference between something being underrated and underseen. Underrated, I find, means that there are a lot of people who have seen this thing, but they don't think it's as good as it probably really is. Underseen movies are movies that just straight up haven't been seen by as many people as I think the quality would suggest there to be. I find that an underseen movie is a movie that just is it's like a hidden gem. People haven't talked about it enough, in my opinion, and I don't see enough conversation going on around it equal to the conversation that I think there should be being had. So I'm here to kind of try to remedy that a little bit today and talk about some horror anthologies that I find are pretty underrated and or underseen, depending on, the kind of verbiage that you want to use. So with all that being said, today I want to talk about 5 horror anthologies that I would consider to be either underseen or underrated, depending on how you use those words. The first one I want to talk about is a movie called From a Whisper to a Scream. Originally titled The Offspring, From a Whisper to a Scream is a 1987 horror anthology directed by Jeff Burr and stars the late, great Vincent Price. This one is comprised of 4 different segments, all of which are set in the fictional town of Oldfield, Tennessee, which is described as being a haunted southern town. The 4 segments are set during different points in the history of the town. Vincent Price plays a character named Julian White, who is the wraparound host of the film, and he relays the different stories to an audience surrogate that we are sort of the stand-in for. I picked this one up during a Scream Factory sale a couple years ago, and I think this one's actually out of print now, so it might be a little hard to find. So if you have this one, hold on to it if you like it, because you probably won't be able to buy it back again easily. It's really an interesting little horror movie, and kind of unlike anything I've ever really seen before. It deals with some really taboo subjects that I'm not actually sure I can name in a YouTube video, so you'll just have to see the movie to get what I mean by that. This was the first feature film from the late Jeff Burr, who is a journeyman of the horror genre. He really was a bit of an auteur. He gave us a lot of horror sequels, namely Puppet Master 2, The Stepfather 2, TCM 3, among many others. The goal for Jeff Burr was to always get Vincent Price in his film, and against all odds, they were able to make it happen. There is a really great making of documentary. It's actually longer than the movie itself. It's almost 2 hours, and it goes very in-depth as to how this scrappy young director who was really hungry to make a movie, and the crew that he surrounded himself with, how they all came together to make this movie. And I just found it really fascinating because, the lengths to which they went to get this thing made, they really went against all the odds. So I really think that this is not only a movie that you should check out, but if you can, grab this release. Maybe you already own it and you just still haven't watched it. Check it out. It's pretty good, and if you like the movie, I think watching the documentary will almost make you like it more. Typically, whenever I do that, I tend to gain a deeper appreciation for the movie after I know a little bit about how the sausage was made, so to speak. Yeah, like I said, it's really just a really scrappy horror movie that isn't afraid to pull any punches, and it feels like it's throwing everything at the wall just to see what sticks and, what works and what doesn't. And some of the segments aren't as good as others, but I find that is almost universally true across all horror anthologies. I think very rarely will you find one where every single segment is like a 10 out of 10. I definitely recommend From a Whisper to a Scream. It's got that southern gothic kind of feel to it. It's really cool. It feels like a hot, sweaty movie, kind of like TCM does, where you can almost, it feels like a movie you can smell, kind of, not in a good way either, but you know, that's what we like these things for. So definitely check this one out if you can. The next one I want to talk about is From Beyond the Grave. From Beyond the Grave is a British 1974 horror anthology produced by British production company Amicus Productions. Amicus was famous for producing a lot of horror anthologies during this era. Some other noteworthy entries that they produced would include The House That Dripped Blood and Tales from the Crypt from 1972. This one was directed by another first-time filmmaker, Kevin Connor, who went on to direct Motel Hell from 1980. This one also has 4 segments with a wraparound featuring Peter Cushing as the proprietor of an antique shop called Temptations Limited. I will say this one probably has one of the best wraparound segments that I have seen in a horror anthology. Some horror anthologies are sort of just disconnected. They're very nebulous. There's not really anything holding them together. And this wraparound of there being a haunted antique shop, hosted by Peter Cushing, by the way, which is just awesome, but it's really cool because the different characters of the different anthologies will come into the store and purchase and or steal a haunted item, and then that haunted item becomes the cornerstone of that segment in the anthology. So I just really love that plot device, that structure, that framing of this movie. I think it's very effective and it works really well. So yeah, like I said, the people come in, they get the haunted items, and it leads to pretty deadly results for the purchaser or thief in some cases. In addition to Peter Cushing, this one has some really prestigious talent attached. You have David Warner, you have Donald Pleasance, you have some other people in there who you might recognize. And to me, this one just felt special when I put it on. I really wasn't sure what to expect. I think I got this from a Warner Archive sale back when they did the 4 for 44 sale. They don't do that anymore, I don't think, but that was a really great time. It was a really cool period of discovery for me because I found a lot of cool movies like this one, and this is probably one of the best movies that I stumbled upon during that era. And it's really why blind buying, as much as I don't do it anymore, sometimes you can find some really great shit when you blind buy, and this is a really good example of that. Being a British film, From Beyond the Grave just feels a little bit classier than your average American horror film. I don't know if that's just a me thing, but I tend to find that the British English sensibilities of Amicus films in particular just tend to come off with a little bit more prestige than your, standard American affair. Yeah, this one just has some really cool ghost stories with some really interesting visuals that I wasn't expecting to get in a British horror film. Sometimes, despite being a little classier, along with that usually tends to come a horror film with a lot of talking, a little bit of talkiness and not enough visual stimulation, which is something I really enjoy. Particularly I think of like Dario Argento films, right? He has 2 kinds of films I find that I can kind of easily sort between, which is his supernatural stuff like Suspiria, Phenomena, Inferno, and then he's got his more procedural stuff like Deep Red and, Bird with the Crystal Plumage, Tenebrae. All great films, but, I tend to gravitate towards the ones with some really eye-popping visuals and just something to look at. I'm in for the talking, don't get me wrong, but I also kind of need some payoffs every now and then to kind of almost justify the talking that I had to sit through. And yeah, this is one that really has some really cool shit. I don't want to spoil anything, but I would definitely check this one out. All right, next up is a movie I've talked about on the channel before. That is A Christmas Horror Story from 2015, which is celebrating its 10th anniversary this year, mind you. And this is a movie that I've talked about numerous times on the channel. I've done an entire video on it. I'll link it up here somewhere. I've listed it in my top 10 Christmas horror films of all time. Spoiler alert, it places pretty high. And who knows, there might even be some more Christmas Horror Story related content coming soon on the channel next month. So, all that being said, Christmas is right around the corner at the time of recording this, so I found that this would be a perfect opportunity to justify another excuse for talking about this movie. And yeah, I really do find that it's an underseen, underrated gem. I really do find that this is the trick or treat of Christmas horror anthologies. Like, quality-wise, I really do think this is right up there, along with the tone. It has a very similar tone as well to Trick or Treat. So I really think that if you like Trick or Treat, you should really do yourself a favor and check this one out. You can get this release. I think it's an RLJE release, but it's also probably streaming on Shudder, if I'm not mistaken, as well. So definitely check out A Christmas Horror Story. Yeah, so despite having done an entire video on this movie, if you're actually interested, I would recommend you go check that out. But what I will say here is that what's really cool and unique about this movie is that it is an anthology, but the stories are sort of intercut with one another. You'll jump from one story to the next until they all conclude in the third act, as opposed to normal horror anthologies where they sort of, you know, start and end and start and end and so on. You have a ghost possession story, you have like a splatter gore story, you have this changeling story, and you have like a slasher, did I say slasher? You have like a slasher story with Krampus. It's just a lot of fun. There's something for everyone here. I think all horror fandoms are kind of represented very equally in this movie. This movie is also surprisingly pretty deep. It goes into themes such as PTSD and, you know, the downsides of having to maybe be around family during the Christmas holidays that you don't necessarily enjoy being around. And, you know, obviously it's elevated for cinematic effect, but it's sort of just trying to peel back the, you know, otherwise very glossy, polished nature that most Christmas movies have, and kind of just saying, like, you know, because for a lot of people, the holidays are not a good time, and they're very upsetting and depressing and stuff. So while this movie is a fun time, it's also highlighting things like that, which I find is very, very important. So I really respect and admire this movie for that. Oh, also the wraparound host is William Shatner as like a radio jockey, DJ guy, and it's awesome. It's really good.
I love tinsel, I love Rudolph, I love cranberries, I love baby Jesus.
All right, next up we have Black Sabbath from 1963. This one is from Italian horror legend Mario Bava. This one consists of just 3 segments, but the wraparound host is none other than Boris Karloff. So we're 4 for 4 as far as having legendary iconic actors as the wraparound hosts of our films here, so that's pretty cool. Karloff is also the lead in one of the segments in this film, which I really appreciate because, you know, unlike with Peter Cushing and Vincent Price and William Shatner to a lesser degree in the other films I've talked about, typically the wraparound hosts, they don't get as much screen time as you'd like, right? They're kind of there to kind of be the glue that ties the whole thing together. So not only is Boris Karloff the wraparound host, but he's also in one of the segments, which is pretty cool. So interesting thing about this movie is there was an original Italian cut of the film that had the segments in a different order from this cut, which is the AIP cut, American International Pictures, I think. So, but yeah, that original cut, it had the segments in a different order, and one of the segments was like heavily altered, and they made a lot of cuts. Specifically, they cut out a lot of prostitution and lesbianism, based on the research that I did. So, you know, I have not seen that original cut, but like, I kind of want to now, based on that description. Sounds a lot more interesting than the version of it that we did get, which is, you know, my least favorite segment of the movie. It's okay, it's fine. It's not as good as the 2 that, you know, are on either side of it. So yeah, I have the Kino Lorber release here, and this is the AIP cut. It's the English language cut. It's probably the cut of the film that most people have seen. If you know where I can find the original cut, if there's a Blu-ray or if it's streaming somewhere, definitely let me know in the comments, because I do kind of want to check it out. I have a feeling I'll probably like it better than this cut. That being said, though, this cut of the film is pretty damn solid. It's, you know, again, Mario Bava, so you're really going to have a hard time finding a bad film of his that I've seen anyway. I'm sure he's got some stuff that he did later in his career, but a lot of the classic Mario Bava stuff is It's classic Mario Bava stuff. It's very good. And this film is no exception. So despite this cut having less lesbian prostitutes than perhaps this other cut may have, I do find that this is a really exceptional horror anthology that does boast 2 very exceptional segments that sort of bookend the one segment that, you know, like I said, is not my favorite, but is still very, you know, adequate. And I do think that it might be for the best that they rearrange the segments like they do in this one, because putting the middle segment, the telephone is the name of the middle segment, putting that one in the middle, it allows for the film to gain some momentum going into the third act by including one of the better segments towards the end. So I find that it probably makes it structurally more well structured. So yeah, if you're a fan of Bava, if you're a fan of horror anthologies, you definitely have to check out Black Sabbath. All right, and rounding out our list for today, we have Quaidon. I think that's how you pronounce that. Forgive me if it's not. I'm gonna keep saying it. I'm gonna say Quaidon. Quaidon? Quaidan? Quaidan? That sounds good. Let's go with that. Quaidan is a 1964 3-hour horror epic from director Masaki Kobayashi. The word Quaidan translates to ghost story or supernatural tales, something to that effect. So definitely an apt title for this film. The film is set in feudal Japan and deals with samurai, ghosts, demons, all sorts of cultural cornerstones of Japan during this era. If we're going by objective quality of the movies that I've assembled for you guys today, I think Quaidan would probably have to be the objective best, like number one, just from a pure quality standpoint. I mean, this is the Criterion Collection release, so, you know, there comes a certain level of prestige with that. And this film was another blind buy for me. I had never heard of or seen this movie prior to straight up blind buying from Criterion during a 50% off flash sale, which is going on right now, by the way. So if what I say about this movie in this video appeals to you, you should definitely go check it out right now while it's 50% off. But yeah, I was looking to explore Japanese horror and, you know, landed on this one. It had a lot of good reviews from mutuals and, you know, people that I respect in the film community. So I pulled the trigger on it, and I'm really glad that I did, because despite being 3 hours long, it's fucking insane. Like, the thing that I love about movies like this, you know, obviously this is from 1964, so that in itself, very long time ago, but the movie is set during feudal Japan, so that's obviously even longer ago. And so what it does is, you know, the thing that all films do really at the end of the day is it presents to you this sort of window in time and allows you to travel back and, you know, really experience what life was like for these people, you know, in a lot of ways. You know, you're only seeing a sort of snapshot of it, but it really serves as like this crystallized version, this image, you know, from people who know this culture and everything. So just such an important movie for that reason. And sort of to that point, every movie that I've assembled for you guys today is from a different culture, a different country. We have a Canadian film, we have an Italian film, a British film, a Japanese film, and an American film. So yeah, a little bit of a, you know, globe-trotting sort of anthology video for you guys today. You can really sort of broaden your horizons with a lot of these horror anthologies. But yeah, this one is another visual feast for the eyes. This was one of like the most expensive Japanese productions of all time, you know, when this was made. Huge sets built in like these airplane hangars that create this sort of uncanny, crystallized, you know, effect where, you know, things look very real, but then again, there's this level of artifice to them, and something just feels quite a little bit off, you know, which gives it this sort of surreal feeling that I really like. If you watch one Japanese horror film in your entire life, I really think it should be Quaidon. It's a husky watch, but for me, it really checked all the boxes of like what I was looking for in this kind of movie. Like what I expected this to be prior to putting it on. It sort of was that, but better than I could have possibly expected. And honestly, what it has done for me is ignited a sort of a passion for Japanese horror films. I really like films like Onibaba and Kuroniko, also from the Criterion Collection, you know, and I'm sure there's many, many more besides that I still have yet to discover. So this is like a crash course, though, in Japanese horror, especially from the 60s. Has this really chilling quality to it. I'm not sure why, but something about that time period really lends itself well to, you know, the sensibilities, I guess, of the era really blend well with like the feudal Japan sort of component. So anyway, I'm going to stop yapping about Quaidon now. All right, guys, so these are my 5 underrated / underseen horror anthology gems, whatever you want to call them. Let me know what you guys think of these movies. If you've seen any of them, let me know your thoughts down in the comments. If there are some that you plan on checking out, please let me know. I'd love to know that I helped spread the good word of these movies. To that point, what are some horror anthologies that you feel don't get enough love? Let me know. Obviously, I love horror anthologies, so drop them down in the comments and I will go check them out. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't. We talk about new movies, old movies, physical media, and horror in general. So with all that being said, guys, please take care and watch more horror movies.